So just a quick question for you. Have you ever had a conversation that was like a life-changing conversation? Have you guys ever had one of those? I remember I was in the ninth grade, and in the ninth grade I had a bully named William Conley. Yes, I remember his name. But William Conley would pick on me, and I really wouldn't say anything about it, and so I would just go home. And I remember one day my mom looked at me, and you know how you moms have your doggone, like, mom tuition, that kind of thing. And she looked at me, and she's like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "Nothing." I thought I was hiding it really well. And she's like, "What's wrong with you?" And so I said, "Okay, I have this bully at school that always picks on me, always, like daily." And she says, "Well, have you talked to any of your teachers about it?" I was like, "No, I'm not going to talk to my teachers about it, because then if they stand up for me, I look like a wuss, so I'm not going to do that either." And she said, "Okay, here's what I want you to do. When you go back to school, if William Conley picks on you, I want you to turn, I want you to grab his collar, and I want you to shove him up against the wall and say to him, 'Leave me alone.'" And I said, "I can do that?" and she was like, "You can do that." I said, "But what if I get in trouble?" She said, "I got you covered." So I was like, all right. So sure enough, I go to school the next day, and as I'm walking across the campus, all of a sudden I hear in the back of my ear, "4 eyes, 4 eyes, 4 eyes." And then all of a sudden, I became like the Incredible Hulk. And I yelled out, "Enough!" And I turned and I grabbed him and I pushed him like 3 feet back up against the wall. And I said, "Don't you ever say anything to me again. If you do, I'll kick your blankety blank, 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 hashtag, exclamation mark, comma, comma, dot." And he never bothered me again. And the thing that was really interesting, nor did any other bully. I never got picked on again, ever. Now, I want to make this really clear. I'm not advocating violence to solve your problems or your issues. I'm just saying it worked for me that day. But it is interesting because there are times where you'll have conversations with people and they'll say something to you. And sometimes, here's the thing that's really interesting, because I've had these moments too, where you're having a conversation and someone will say something about something that you're going through, but they have no idea that you're going through it. But they say something and it really speaks to you in that moment, and you're like, "Man, that is exactly what it is that I needed to hear." And it does, it becomes life-changing. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a life-changing conversation that happens on the cross. But before we get there, last week we started a brand new series called "Does God Care?" And the reality is, when we look at our world around us, again, you don't have to watch TikTok too long or Instagram Reels. You don't have to scroll too much to see that there's a problem with our world. And ultimately that our world is broken. And then, if you drive on the freeway, you also know that people are broken. And you go to the office and you deal with broken people. So there's brokenness all around us. And the question that we may ask about that is, God, do you really care about that brokenness? And so last week what we did was we explored a moment when Jesus Christ is on the cross and he says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And in that we explored the fact that what he was identifying was the fact that the people that are around him are all broken, that they're broken, and that he cares and he wants them to be restored and renewed. So now the question that we're going to explore, and you can see this right on the screen as well. This is what we're going to be exploring for the next few weeks, and that's simply this. If God cares, then why is the world still broken? Like, if God cares, you would think that he'd step in. You would think that he would do. So if God cares, then why is the world still broken? So we're going to explore that thought over the next the next few weeks. And here's the thing that I really want us to begin to think about. Like, if the crucifixion and the resurrection is the solution that Scripture promises to be, then again, it is a legitimate reason to ask, well, then why is it still broken? And here's the reality. I mean, let's be honest. Why is Christianity still broken? Right? Because I think, many of us had conversations with people, with, ourselves. We've talked amongst ourselves, and we've talked about, Christianity today is not being represented well. And so the question becomes, well, then why is it broken? And here's the other question that I think is really important for us to dig in. Although I've made a commitment to Christ, are there parts of me that are still broken? And how do I navigate? How do I begin to see that change? Because, the reality is that healing cannot happen until I step into that place for it to become reality in my life. And although the cross and the resurrection is a declaration of that healing, is there still a way that we're missing it? Is there still something that we're not quite putting our fingers on that allows us to continue to be broken? And so with that, here's what we're going to be looking at today. If I could sum up the sermon today in one sentence, it'll be this. You can see this right on the screen as well. There is no conversation too short, no life too broken, and no moment too late for Jesus to transform. I love that. There's no conversation too short, no life too broken, no moment too late for Jesus to transform. I can tell you now, the most powerful prayer that I've ever prayed in my life was one word: help. Right? So I think it's important for us to look at that. So again, I want you to understand what's happening on the cross. And again, I'm going to be hitting this over the course of this series as we walk through, because here's what we're going to do, is we're examining the question, does God care? And what we're doing for this series is we are looking at the last 7 statements that Jesus Christ makes on the cross. And in those 7 statements, we do see his heart, and we do see how he cares. And so we're going to look at one of those last 7 statements today. But I want you to understand the context of, especially for this statement that we're going to be looking at today, because realize Jesus Christ is hanging on the cross. He looks out. The religious leaders are probably gloating over his death because we've got the victory. We are shutting him up now, kind of thing. If you look at the crowd is jeering him. The crowd is, they're mocking him. They're making fun of him. He's looking down. The soldiers are gambling for his clothing. It really is a disgraceful moment. And he's looking at, again, like the worst of humanity. And again, he looks around, and is what he does not see, right? He doesn't see his friends. There's only one disciple that's there, and that's John. So he really doesn't see his friends that are there that he's invested with for 3 years. So for all intents and purposes, a majority of his friends have abandoned him. Remember, one of his friends betrayed him. Another one of his friends denied him. So that's happening. But then also, I want you to understand what's happening physically on the cross, because this is an excruciating moment that's happening to him. So if you've never heard this before, what happens is when you're hanging on the cross, you're hung in such a way to where your body is hanging. And so what happens is over the course of time, your internal organs begin to collapse on your lungs. And so really, death by crucifixion is a death by suffocation. And so in order for you to breathe, what has to happen is, remember, because there were nails in his hands and his what? His feet. So in order for him to breathe, what he has to do is he has to push up on his feet. Now he's pushing up on the nails. He's also pulling up on the nails so that he can take in a breath. And then he relaxes again. So realize every time Jesus Christ is making a statement on the cross, he is having to go through. So we're looking at just agony in this moment of, that he's going through, that he's navigating, and that he's dealing with. And so, literally, again, he's dying on the cross, literally. But we also know that he wasn't crucified alone. In Luke 23, verses 32 through 33, it tells us 2 others, both criminals, were led out to be executed with him. When they came to a place called the Skull, they nailed him to the cross, and the criminals were also crucified, one on his right and one on his left. So I guess you can see where this is going. This is the conversation we're going to talk about. We're going to be talking about, the thieves and their conversations with Jesus. And, we look at, here's a conversation with a man who is dying, and you are dying yourself, but with the man who is dying. And I kind of, I wanted to get a picture of what is happening, I guess, in this moment, and to kind of give us a picture as well, because Jesus is going to be asked something. And so, the thought that came to mind for me is like, just imagine that you have a friend that is in the hospital and that, the prognosis isn't good. And so you go in and you visit your friend and you're talking to your friend and it just doesn't look good. And you're having this conversation, and as you're talking, you're saying to your friend, like, man, I'm sorry that you're going through this. I'm sorry because it doesn't look good right now. How are you feeling? Well, maybe that's a dumb question because it's kind of hard, and you're talking about what your friend's going through, and then as you're talking, you kind of slide one in like, hey, do you still have those Nike Air Jordans? Because you're not going to need them anymore. So can I have them? Kind of thing. So this kind of like is almost like a conversation that is happening, on the cross, and like, wouldn't it be like, imagine that you are with your friend and you hear someone come in and have that conversation. Like, would you be mad? Would you be mad? Would you want to pick them up and throw them against the wall and say, get your blankety blank blank hashtag exclamation mark out of here, kind of thing? So as we're looking at this, we're going to dive into this conversation now. And there's three things that we're going to look at as we're looking at this conversation. The first thing that we're going to look at is, why is the world still broken? So we're going to look at that. The second thing that we're going to look at is the repentant heart. Like, what does the repentant heart truly look like? And then the third thing that we're going to look at is just the immediacy and the beauty of grace and how incredible grace is. So join me on this journey. So again, we have two thieves on the cross, right? One on his left, one on his right. One thief turns to Jesus in Luke chapter 23, verse 39. It says, one of the criminals hanging beside him scoffed, so you're the Messiah, are you? Prove it by saving yourself and us too while you're at it. Right? And us too while you're at it. So of course we know that the other thief responds and kind of corrects the guy. And then in Luke 23:42, it says, then he said, the other thief said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. So here's the thing that's really interesting to me, because as I was reflecting on this, here are two people in the same exact location, same exact situation, same exact predicament, same exact pain, same exact suffering, same exact... these people, you can't get two people who are going through something similar together. Yet in this moment, you see two very different responses to the Savior and to who he is, and to their view on him and their view on the way that he can work for them or with them. So, and I think what this does is this gives us insight, because the question that we asked before, if God cares, then why is the world still broken? And I think the world is still broken because it sees God as a resource rather than a refuge. See, what happens is, with the first guy, he saw Jesus as a resource. Are you a Messiah? If you are the Messiah, if you are who you claim to be, then get me out of here. Get me out of here. You could do something for me. But for the other thief, the interesting thing with him is he never asked to be delivered. He just said, hey, Jesus, I just want to be with you. I want to be with you. Two very different perspectives. So I think one of the reasons why the world is still broken, and I think even with Christianity today, why is it still broken, is because God is seen as a resource rather than a refuge. And I would even say that sometimes we preachers are guilty of presenting him that way. Because think about it. How many times have you heard, if you don't want to go to hell, believe in Jesus, right? Commit your life to him. So, in other words, Jesus is my resource to avoid damnation. If you want to get your life together, like your life is a mess, right? If you want to get your life together, then commit your life to God, to Jesus. So now Jesus is also my resource to get me out of my mess. And some people will go even as far to say that if you want to be healthy, wealthy, and wise, commit your life to Jesus. So what happens is Jesus becomes my resource. And the problem with seeing Jesus as my resource is that I begin to look at him as I believe in him because he's a benefit to my life. I get something out of this. And here's the problem, though. How many times, and again, sometimes that's our fault as preachers, but how many times and how many people do you know who have walked away from God because my resource didn't work for me? It didn't provide what I needed. It didn't provide my rescue. It didn't get me out of my situation. That's the danger of seeing him as a resource. When I see him as a resource, again, I'm in it for what I can get, what it can give to me. That there is some situational benefit that I get in my life because I, quote unquote, believe in Jesus and who he is. But really, for me, he's just a resource. He's just a resource. Compared to the other thief, and in the conversation that he has with Jesus, he just says, he never asks, I am speaking really great English today, but he never asks to be rescued. He just simply says, look, Jesus, I want to be with you. So he sees Jesus as his refuge. And you know what refuge is? Another word for refuge is home. Now think about what home means to you. Like picture, okay, how about this? You can go on vacation, right? And you can sleep in a great bed. But is it like your bed? No. Right? You can go and you can be in a great room with a great couch, but is it like your couch? Like your room? Right? There's something about home. As a matter of fact, many of you dress up when you go to work, right? And then as soon as you walk in the door, what is the first thing to come off? Your shoes, right? Your shoes, got it. Mm-mm. And then for you women, it's like, right? So you are getting comfortable. And then you go to your room, and then you take off especially if it's like a white-collar job or even a blue-collar job. Maybe you go, you take a shower, but you get comfortable, and then you go, and maybe you take off the dress, you take off the suit, you take off the shirt, and then, you put on some shorts or some sweats. Sweats have holes in them, but you're home. You are relaxed. You are comfortable. And the thing about home is the place where I can be me at home. I can be me at home. When I'm outside of home, I put on a wares, right? I put on a pretense because I have to but when I get home, I can just be me. And we all agree, right? There's no place like home. And so this is the idea of learning how to see Jesus as our refuge. You're my home. In Matthew 7, and this is not on the screen, Glenn, so don't worry about putting it up there. I don't want to stress you out. But in Matthew 7, we see a difference between resource and refuge. Because Jesus says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. There will be some that will say, well, did we not preach in your name? Did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not cast out demons in your name? In other words, didn't we not do all of these great things with you as our resource? We did all these credible things with you as our resource. And Jesus will say, I will tell them, depart from me, for I never knew you. Right? You were involved with the resource. I wanted to be your refuge. I wanted to be your refuge. And so this is the challenge that we must make sure that we look at. I made a list of other things I thought about. The difference between refuge and resource. Resource is a transaction. Refuge is a relationship. Resource is access. Refuge is intimacy. Resource is what God gives. Refuge is who God is. So in other words, a resource serves your life. A refuge reshapes your life. So there's definitely a difference between the two. And let's be honest, And let me say this again. I want to make sure that you know this is not about guilt in the least bit. Because I'll be honest with you. When I first made a commitment to Jesus, it was as a resource. I had watched this movie called, what was it? A Thief in the Night. I think it was called that. It was A Thief in the Night. And then there's this one scene with this guy, and he's riding a motorcycle, you know, kind of. I think it was called A Thief in the Night. It might have been a different one, but it's one of those '70s flicks. But I'm watching them at my grandfather's church, and it shows this guy, and he has like an accident, and you see like brain matter and stuff like spilled. Yeah, it was intense. Then all of a sudden you hear you hear like these demons. They come up and they grab the guy and they take the guy to hell. And I'm like, I don't want to go to hell. So yes, I believe in Jesus. But honestly, I made a commitment because Jesus was a resource. And if I'm honest with you, a majority of my Christian life, Jesus has been a resource. I'm committed to him because there is a benefit that I get from following him, and maybe in some ways my life will be better. Better opportunities, better chances, better growth that I wouldn't have if I didn't have Jesus. But in reality, as much as he was my resource, he was not my refuge. So he was in my life, but not of my life. Right? There was not that intimate connection with him. And you know, again, in my honesty, this is something I've been exploring maybe like the last 3-4 years where I began to understand this. And I still don't have it down. I'm still trying to figure it out and what it looks like and what it is. But I will tell you that Jesus invites you to step into him and allow him to be your refuge for that intimacy and for that connection that you could have with him. And there's a perfect story that kind of shows how people can see Jesus as a resource. There's this one time when Jesus was walking along, and these 10 lepers all came to Jesus. And the 10 lepers, and for those of you that may not know, lepers were people who had leprosy, and leprosy was like the skin disease. It would be sores, it would be stinky, you could lose limbs, like it was horrific. And so those 10 guys, they come to Jesus, and they ask Jesus to be healed. And he does. He heals all 10 of them, and then he says, go to the priest. Because back in biblical times, when you had leprosy, you were considered what's called unclean. You could not go to the temple. You could not be in social circles. You would even be like disconnected from your family. Like you'd be kicked out of the family because the whole goal was to try to protect themselves from leprosy. So you would be declared what was called unclean. So what you'd have to do is you'd have to go to the priest. You'd have to present yourself, your skin, and then the priest would look at you and would see like, oh man, you know, have you been using lotion? You know, kind of thing. The priest would look at you like, what kind of Nivea? Like, what kind of lotion are you using? But the priest would look at you, and then as a result of that, the priest would go, clean. So all 10 of the guys go to Jesus. They're declared clean by the priest, but of the 10, only one comes back. And here's what it says in Luke chapter 17, verses 17 through 19. It says, Jesus asked, didn't I heal 10 men? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give glory to God except this foreigner? Because the other 9 were Jewish guys. This one was a Samaritan. So he wasn't even, you know, so you would expect the other 9 guys to come back and the one not to, not the other way around. But it goes on, and Jesus said to this man, and this is interesting. He says, stand up and go. Your faith has healed you. Which I always wondered, wait, wasn't he already healed? So what do you mean your faith has healed you? But what happens, the other 9 saw Jesus as a resource. He saw Jesus as a refuge, so he comes back, and he is grateful. And as a result of that gratitude, there is something that he is given that the other 9 weren't. And here's what the other 9 weren't given. They weren't given that assurance by Jesus. Your faith has healed you. So you know what happens now with the other 9 is maybe they get some ashy skin. They use wrong soap, and they wake up and their skin is ash. Oh my goodness, is my leprosy back? Or if they get estranged, oh my goodness, is my leprosy back? There's always that question like, am I really? But for this guy, your faith has healed you. So he's like, man, just give me some lotion, I'm good. Just give me a Band-Aid, I'm good. There is the assurance that comes because of that connection. And so that's what I want to encourage us to do, is to make sure that we examine our hearts and just ask ourselves, God, are you my resource or are you my refuge? And like I said, I'm being honest with you. It's a transition that I am making in my life. And I pray that, it's something that we'd be willing to continue to do as well. So why is the world still broken? In many ways, why is Christianity still broken? It's because of the simple fact that we see God as a resource, just something to add to our lives, just an extra benefit to make our lives good, to make our lives tolerable, and to make sure that when we die, we go to heaven. But real change happens when we see him as a refuge. That's where real change happens. So with that in mind, as we look at that, now, so we've talked about why is the world still broken. Now here's what I want to explore. What does a repentant heart look like? What does it look like? So that allows us to be able to reconnect with him. And it says this in Luke chapter 23, verse 42, going back there. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Remember me when you come into Jesus. Remember me when you come into your kingdom. Now, let's look at this. Do you see the difference? What is the difference between the one thief and the way that he talked to Jesus compared to this thief and the way that he talked to Jesus? The other thief said, prove that you are the Messiah, right? Prove that you are positionally who you claim to be. So again, that is resource. That is resource, as opposed to this man, and here's, I love this. This man turns to him, and he doesn't say Messiah. He turns to him, and he says, Jesus. Jesus. Now, I really want you to understand the significance of this moment, because this is the first time since the trial has happened that Jesus' name has not been connected with mockery. It has not been connected with judgment. It has not been connected with the hypocrisy of the guys using his name. This is the first time that his name is used in an intimate, connected way. And I love it. He says, not Messiah, he says Jesus. So in other words, by saying Jesus, he says, I see you. I see you. Now, realize, I think, what inspired this moment? Because before this, in Matthew and Mark, when it talks about the two thieves, it talks about the two thieves being amongst the markers, the mockers, the ones who are mocking Jesus. But then, in Luke, there's this story here. And people think, well, what is the difference? And I think Luke was able to connect with the witnesses, saw this moment. And here's what I think happened in the heart of the thief. Like if he was one of the mockers, just before this passage, remember, he's hanging next to Jesus when he hears Jesus cry out, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He hears that. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh my goodness. He's praying for his mockers, for the hypocrites, the people that practice hypocrisy. He's praying for them. He's praying for everyone. And so I imagine that for the thief, it must have been a moment like, he really is who he claims to be as far as his compassion, his heart, his mercy. That's what I need. Jesus. He calls him by name. So I think the first step to the truly repentant heart is to recognize who Jesus truly is. The one who loves you so much that he went to the cross on your behalf. And not just went to the cross on your behalf, stayed on the cross for your behalf. The one who loves you so much that he spent 3 days in the grave on your behalf. And the one who loves you so much that he rose again, declaring the ultimate victory on your behalf. So again, and I want to make this really clear, I'm not advocating choosing Jesus for what he did on your behalf. I'm advocating choosing Jesus because he loves you so much that you are worth it. Choose him. Choose him. And then not only that, he turns to Jesus, he says, Jesus, and then the next two words he says what? Remember me. Remember me. Now, it's really interesting because this was not like, what is it? Was it the Pretenders? Don't you forget about me. Right? This wasn't one of those moments, right? This wasn't that. It wasn't like that, remember me. Here's what's really interesting. In Hebrew tradition, when someone says, remember me, it was almost like, be an advocate on my behalf. Be an advocate on my behalf. Because realize when he says Jesus, and then also he says basically, I want to be with you, in the middle of that by saying, remember me, realize in this moment, it wasn't like he could say, hey, Jesus, I want to follow you. So, actually he was on it. Jesus, I want to follow you. So I'm going to get down off this cross, and I'm going to go, and I'm going to help some people. I'm going to go, I'm going to make it right. I'm going to go, and I'm going to be a good guy. I'm going to go, and I'm going to do nice things. I'm going to make up for all the wrong things that I've done. Can he do that from the cross? No. And here's the thing that's important for us to understand, too. The mentality that I have to make myself right for God is also the same mentality that sees him as a resource. So when I see him as my refuge, then it's remember me. Remember me. I'm broken in shame, in guilt. Remember me. Remember me. And that's what he's done for every single one of us. He remembered us. He remembered us. So he says, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. So realize that what this is an incredible statement of faith in this moment. Literally, he is saying to Jesus, remember the other guy said, are you the Messiah? Well, then prove it. To this guy, he says, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. Like, I know that your kingdom is going to come in the future. Now, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what that means because you're here on the cross, you know. So, and remember in their minds, there was a physical kingdom that was going to come about. That's what they were thinking. So when you come into your kingdom, remember me. I don't even know if he understood like the concept of eternity and what was about to happen. But Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. This is a statement of faith. Of faith. And he's saying, you are who you claim to be. You are who you claim to be. So I'm going to believe in you as a result of that. And I love this. Going back in Psalm chapter 25, verses 7 through 8, I love this. It says, do not remember the rebellious sins of my youth. Remember me in the light of your what? Unfailing love. For you are merciful, O Lord. Remember me. Not my failures, not my shame, not my guilt. Remember me in light of your incredible love for me when you come into your kingdom. So, when we look at the repentant heart, here's what we see. We see a recognition of who Jesus is. We also see a recognition of the fact that I can't fix myself. I can't make myself right. I don't have the power to be able to do so. So there's this incredible leaning on Jesus Christ. And then finally, there's this faith that when your kingdom comes, I will be with you. I will be with you. So again, I'm choosing you. And then, I love this, because now we see the immediacy of faith, or the immediacy of grace, because it says in Luke 23:43, and now realize, I assure you today, you will be with me in paradise. So, in order for Jesus to deliver his grace, he even had to go through excruciating pain in that moment to offer that grace. So again, does God care? He is willing to go through what is excruciating to show you his mercy, to show you his love, and to give you the opportunity to embrace that and to be able to live for him. And you know what I love about this too? Is the thief, his thinking was like, someday. And Jesus' response with immediacy of grace, he said what? Today. Now, you will be with me. Grace is not something that happens, when we die and we go through. No, grace, the moment that you said, Jesus, I believe in you, and Jesus, I want to be with you, the moment that you say that, grace comes in. It's immediate. And we can live in that grace, live in that freedom. That's the beauty of him being our refuge. Because with him being our refuge, we live in grace because we live in him. And again, so today you will be with me in paradise. We have to be careful about which part of you will be with me in paradise. We have to be careful about which part we put our focus on, right? Because if we put our focus on paradise, then he becomes what? Bingo. He becomes a resource. He becomes a resource. And that just came out of nowhere. I'm sorry. but he does. He becomes a resource. So the most important thing to realize is not where we're going to be with him. Although that's great. Like, it'll be paradise. That's going to be awesome. But the most important part of that statement is today you will be with me. With me. That's refuge. With me. So the invitation of Christ is not an invitation of heaven. The invitation of Christ is himself. Heaven's the benefit. It's himself. And so I want to encourage us to kind of go back. And one of the things that is really important to me is whenever I write a message, I also want to write messages that also make me uncomfortable. They make me uncomfortable. And so I'll be honest with you, like this week I've been asking, like, are you my resource or my refuge? Are you my resource or my refuge? And that's when it kind of forced me to be honest. And so I just want to let you know this morning, like if you're listening and you're here, and if you're honest with yourself, you're like, man, I chose Jesus because I needed him as my resource. Okay. There's no guilt there. It's not meant to make you guilty. But just to recognize. Like, and here's the beauty of this. When you see him as your refuge, you begin to realize there's so much more to this. There's so much more to this. And the greatest part that there is to this is life. Is life. Having him as our refuge is where our Christian walk comes alive as we live for him and as we live with him. It comes alive. And so now, when I wake up in the morning, it's like, man, I could be with Jesus, but guess what? I'm still with Jesus. And today, Jesus, I'm going to be with you. Help me to recognize those little moments where you show your presence with me through this day, because you're with me and I'm with you. So every day now becomes a gift. That gift because I am with him. And again, life comes alive. And also because I'm with him, my perspective about other people change as well. And I begin to see, you know what happens? Is when he's my refuge and my life begins to come alive and hopefully people are able to see something different in me, then hopefully what I can begin to do is now I'm introducing them to Jesus, who is not my resource, but Jesus, who is my refuge. And this is the part that's so important for us to understand. With the thief, he still suffered. He still suffered. And ultimately, he died. So his following of Jesus did not change his circumstance physically on this earth, but it did for eternity. So I think it's important, again, for us to understand that when we're talking about Jesus, that we make it really clear that I'm with Jesus no matter what happens in my life, no matter what the mess might be, no matter how much it might fall apart. He's not my resource, he's my refuge. And I pray that that becomes the stance of our lives as well. So again, here at Encounter, we are committed to we make the commitment to live according to a standard that Jesus gave us, and that is Mark 12, 30, and 31. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbor as yourself. So the core value of our church is love God, love others, and love ourselves. And so with that, here at Encounter, we say love, love, and love. So what we do is with every message, we end the message by looking at those three things. And so here's some things that we can think about. With love up, with loving God, am I treating Jesus as a resource or a refuge? By coming to him for what he can give me, or coming to him for who he is? Think about that. Think about that. Love out. How can I be a positive influence to inspire others to love God for who he is, as opposed to what he can do? You know what? There's something about seeing someone live life with a supernatural strength where others would be defeated. Even when things fall apart, there's still a supernatural strength that is there. And that is a result of seeing him as a refuge. That even if everything falls apart, I'm with him. And then love in. What is one honest thing I need to say to Jesus that I've been too ashamed, too proud, or too afraid to say? The thief turned to Jesus. Jesus, remember me. What's your thing that you would love to say to him? And he invites you to do so. He invites you to come to him. He invites you to the opportunity to live with and in him. And the beauty of that is when you bring it before Jesus and you are honest before him, there's no rejection, there's no shock, there's no disappointment. You know what there is? Finally. Yes. Because you know how much I love you. So bring it all to me. Bring it all to me. Jesus, we thank you